Hello, my name's Andrew, and today we're doing a first impression review of the SOFTSTAR Switchback Boot Superfabric Edition. Let's take a look at it. Up front, you have an option between either a medium or an extra wide toe box. This is the regular width, but they also have the Primal. This is the Primal Run Amok shoe, which is really great for running, but it gives you a sense of what the shape looks like for the boot. I generally go up size with SOFTSTAR if I'm gonna go with the regular one because they do a traditional stitching in the top, so you lose just a little bit of room in the front. Normally I go with 11, my feet are 10.5, and I went with the 12 in these, which works really well for me, especially because it's kind of a winter boot, you know, so I'm usually stacking up socks in it. And I would say that if you're gonna go with the Primal, if you want a little more width, then you probably don't need a size up. I think it definitely helps to have that wider toe box shape. Because the regular width just has a little bit more taper to it, so you can lose some length there as well. But I was just able to go with my regular size in the Primal for the shoes. So yeah, that's my little tip on sizing. But this is basically the same thing as the leather switchbacks, which we're gonna talk about. But with the Superfabric version, it has a ballistic grade material on the outside, and this stuff's really, really tough. So I took them out hiking for about 2 hours today, and at one point I was like scratching, you know, the upper with a rock and just like nothing, you know, it's like having a bunch of little tiny shields. And so this version of the boot is really good if you're going through rugged terrain or places where there might be like sharp rocks, thorns, that sort of thing, and a regular leather upper that's a little bit softer is not gonna cut it for you. In terms of the laces, they've got these nice beefy laces, your normal lace eyelets on the bottom, which hold really well, and then the top, 2 quick lace hooks. And I found they work really well because the laces are pretty big and they hold in there. It's easy to take the boot on and off. And another thing I like about the Switchback is that it's very easy to open up. It doesn't have a gusseted tongue, which kind of has pros and cons. For one, these boots are really breathable. They are water resistant. Actually, they will shed some water off of the Superfabric. I think they're actually a little more water resistant than the leather versions. However, because they don't have a gusseted tongue, there's only so high that you can go, you know, like you can go up to about here with, you know, medium puddles. But then like I was taking it into a little creek and I dipped them a little too far and the water kind of like went up and then they do get wet. But yeah, the Superfabric does seem to be pretty water resistant, which is nice. And SOFTSTAR's added a couple layers of protection, you know, wrapping around, which helps as well. But overall, this is like one of the most flexible and lightweight barefoot boots you can buy for winter. And I really like it because it's super agile. You can really cinch these snugly and get a really good lockdown on your ankles so you're not slipping around in the boot, because that's really important for going up and down steep hills. And you can see that it's got a little bit of taper here, which helps with heel lock as well. Inside, the Switchback has a full wool lining, which I love. It's really great for temperature regulation, moisture wicking, it's antimicrobial, so you know, even after going on a hike, they smell really well. They kill bacteria. And it's really good at wicking moisture away from your foot. And like I said, without the gusseted tongue, they're very good for breathability. So like today, when I started out, I was about 45 and then it got up to like 60, which, you know, a lot of winter boots will max out on, and, you know, they'll certainly get warm, but they're really good at taking hot air and moisture and moving it out of the boot because there's so much room for breathability and because the whole thing is lined with wool. And like I was talking about when I got them wet, you know, with most like waterproof boots, for example, like if you get water splashing over, they just like trap it, you know, there's nowhere for the water to go and they have like swamp foot, you know, for the rest of the hike. But with a breathable boot like this, that's just water resistant, not fully waterproof, doesn't have the gusset to cut off, you know, airflow, they started to dry right away. And the nice thing about wool is that actually it's like really weird. Like once it gets wet, it actually warms up, you know, so if you kind of went through a creek and you stepped a little too deep and it's really cold, it's just nice because then your toes aren't going to freeze to death, which, you know, a waterproof boot without a wool lining can do. In terms of the sole, it has a 6mm Vibram Mega Grip sole. For a little bit thicker barefoot sole, this is the best in terms of just grip and protection. It's pretty amazing because even though the sole is a bit thicker, it just has really good flexibility and agility. You can fold it in half like this, which you usually can't do with thicker soles. And I love the tread pattern on this because on the outside, you've got these thicker lugs that are great for protecting you from like larger rocks, you know, if you're going on backpacking trips, something like that. But then on the inside, they've got this triangle portion, which is a little more spaced out. So this grips very well on mud. If you're going up and down steep, slippery hills, it's excellent. And it also has a ton of tackiness to it. Like when I first broke these boots out and I was walking around inside, you can hear the you have this sort of like gluey type sound, you know? And that wears off pretty much as soon as you take them out, but it just kind of goes to show like how grippy this sole is. Also above the tread, you can see that there's a mid layer, and this is kind of just like a semi-firm foam, adds a little bit of padding because these are denser lugs, you know, and they can feel kind of hard, especially on longer hikes, so that feels good to me. In terms of ground feel, this is probably about 12 millimeters thick in total with the foam and the rubber outsole. So I would say, you know, it's pretty minimal ground feel. You'll feel like larger and medium-sized rocks, but not so much the smaller detailed gravel stuff that you'll get with a thinner boot. But like I said, really good flexibility for how thick it is. And if you find you want some more padding, Softstar ships them with a wool-lined insole, and then it has a little bit of foam here. Again, doesn't really affect ground feel or flexibility. You know, it's still quite thin, but it just provides a little bit of padding for those lugs, which can feel nice when you're out for a lot longer period of time on like really hard grounds, you know? And just a hot tip on taking them out, when they first come, they have this little piece of adhesive here. So they're in the bottom of the boot, and what you want to do is just take your finger and just gently, slowly peel them out. It's not that strong, but if you just rip it out, you can actually tear the foam here. And that's something to consider if you were planning on returning them or something like that. You weren't sure if you're going to keep them because you wouldn't want to ruin the insole. Also, if you find the insole is a little bit too thick, you can use just a thinner wool felt insole. I really like these, and they have, you know, the same benefit of being moisture wicking, temperature regulating, etc. But they're a little thinner, a little bit more flexible. The one drawback about these is like if you're going down really steep hills or even trail running, which you can actually do in the switchback boot, which is pretty amazing. They can do like this, you know, like if you're going down a really steep hill, there's just too much pressure. So that's one benefit of having an insole that has a little more structure, is that it generally won't do that. Another great accessory for winter barefoot boots is the Injinji merino wool toe socks. They're also super breathable. They spread out your toes, which is great for airflow. And just like the lining on the switchback, they're moisture wicking, temperature regulating, antimicrobial, all that good stuff. All right, so like we talked about, this is the Softstar switchback. The original version has a full leather upper. I think it's very similar. The only major differences are the super fabric is just a little bit more durable to scratches. You know, you can see the leather is fairly soft. So I think this one feels just a little bit softer, a little bit more flexible in the upper. And then water resistance is a little bit lower, although you can treat it with like beeswax and lanolin, which definitely helps. If you need something for super cold weather, this is the Blanca winter boot, and it's also lined with wool, but it's even thicker. So these have a little bit lower temperature range, like 50 would be probably the highest you can get, and that's really pushing it because it is super warm. But it does have an extra wide toe box. I would say Softstar is just a little bit wider because the insulation is not quite as thick in there, and this one it's thicker, so it just takes up a little more room. But it feels also really flexible and soft for the upper, and then for the tread, it's an 8mm tread. So a little bit thinner than Softstar, a little bit more flexible. And the grip is definitely oriented towards softer ground, although I like the fact that you can see how squishy the lugs are, so it actually feels amazing walking on roads too. But in terms of like really rugged, rocky terrain, I would probably go with the Mega Grip sole because this is a bit softer rubber and I feel like it could get worn down. So it's a good one to use for like snow and slush and urban terrain and light trails, just, you know, not super hardcore hiking and things like that. But also it is waterproof, although one thing I will say is that it's not a stitched sole. So I think right here I have just a little bit of separation, but you know, I've had these for over a year and they're still working really well and they still seem to be waterproof. So if you ever have this happen with a glued sole, you can just take some shoe glue and put it in there and then do some light clamping, and that can usually fix it. For a lighter weight option, this is the Real Foot Trekker High. This is probably one of my favorite barefoot kind of casual hiking boots of 2024. It's just so light. Has a extra wide toe box like Softstar. I would say it's almost even a little wider. Real Foot's probably the widest barefoot brand, and it actually feels kind of amazing though because it's not wide in the back, so you have a nice lockdown even if you're someone like me that has medium width feet. Softstar tends to be a little bit wider here, so that's something to consider if you have like a wider midfoot. That might be a better fit for you. But I just like the style. I think it looks really cool. Like the flexible back here, also super lightweight and agile in the upper, another one that you can actually do some trail running in. Although it doesn't have as much grip as Softstar, it's got a 4mm tread that feels really amazing on roads and light trails, but not as much protection as like a Mega Grip tread, and can be slippery on super steep hills. It does, however, have a gusseted tongue, so the water resistance is very good on this. It's not quite waterproof, but it's very close. And then it's got a vegan synthetic insulation in there, as well as a water resistant liner. It says waterproof, but I think it's more water resistant, although like I said, very high. And it is squishy, so it's not quite as breathable or temperature regulating as merino wool, but yeah, it's pretty good. And then if you want a vegan option, this is the Highlander. Basically the same thing, just a little bit higher than the Trekker High, and a bit thicker insulation here, but overall, same thing. If you need something for more rugged terrain, this is the Vivo Barefoot Tracker AT Mock. It's got a really cool moccasin traditional design to it. And also pretty flexible. It does have a little bit more protection, a little more structure than the other ones. And the toe box is wide, but it's not extra wide, although it does have some good stretch. As you can see, you can let the laces out for a little more room. It has a gusseted tongue, so the water resistance is very good. It's not completely waterproof. And because of the moccasin design, it can trap a little bit of water here, but as long as you keep it treated with wax and lanolin, leather balsam, it's usually fine. I will say the leather is a little bit softer, so they do have the Tracker AT leather, which it does have more structure than this in the upper, but if you need something that has both like a really hardcore tread plus a lot of protection up here, that would be a good option. But if you're on trails that are more open and you're not worried about, scratching it with thorns or anything, I prefer the feeling of it. I think it just feels a little bit softer and more comfortable. They do have a wool lining here, which feels amazing. And then the tread is 6.5mm, so kind of in the middle of the boots that we've looked at, some good flexibility. I think the lugs feel a little bit more beefy, so walking on roads, I would say this one feels the most clunky out of the boots we've talked about. But it's really good for rugged terrain, where you have larger, sharp rocks and you need more protection. But the nice thing is, because the lugs are a little bit deeper, the midsole itself, you can see it's got a lot of nice squish. You get some ground feel coming up through there, even though you have really good protection. The grip is good. The lugs are a little bit wider, as you can see. They've got that chevron shape, so going up hills, they grab really well. And same thing for going down hills, they're in the opposite direction in the back, and a little closer as well. So if you need one for really sharp rocks and rugged terrain, but you want some softness, the AT Mock is a good option. Finally, if you want more of a mid-cut boot, this is the Zero Denver. It comes in the leather version, also a vegan canvas, which is also very good. Water resistance is, I would say, medium compared to some of the other ones. You can treat it with wax and lanolin to make it a little bit more water resistant, but it does have a glued sole. It's kind of a softer material, which I love, but it can be a little bit more porous, especially when it's not treated. Inside it's got a synthetic insulation, so it's kind of like medium warm. It's a good one for transitional periods in spring and later fall. Where it's not super cold, but it's also not warm. And then in terms of the tread, it's 5.5mm, so just a little bit under medium thick. Good flexibility. I've cut lines here, so there's really good flex in the toes and in the middle. And then the lug pattern I love as well. It's a chevron shape, so it's close enough together where it feels good on roads and rocks, but also far enough apart that it can work on some hills, maybe not super steep and muddy hills, but pretty much everything this tread has got you covered. All right, so that's my first impression review of the Softstar Switchback Superfabric Edition, but I'll let you guys know how it goes in the long-term review. And until then, if you'd like to support the channel, you can shop the referral links down below. Browse and filter more products with the Shoe Finder tool at my website, barefootwear.org, or watch my zero drop transition video to learn more about barefooting. Finally, if you have a question about the Softstar Switchback or about barefoot shoes in general, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.